I used to believe Christmas had magic, not the fairy-like kind, the second chance kind, the kind where old wounds soften. People say what they've held back all year, and families finally choose each other, at least for 1 week in December. That belief cost me everything. My name is Elena Ward. I'm 42, financially independent, emotionally careful, and, until last Christmas, still foolish enough to hope my family would someday see me as more than a convenience. From the outside, we looked respectable, elegant even. My mother, Grace, loved hosting picture-perfect holidays. My younger brother, Lucas, carried the effortless charm that forgave every mistake he ever made. And then there was me, the reliable one, the planner, the problem solver, the woman who paid quietly and spoke carefully so no one felt uncomfortable. Every Christmas followed the same rhythm. I showed up early. I helped late. I covered gaps no one acknowledged, and when something went wrong, it somehow landed at my feet. Still, that year felt different. I had just closed a major consulting contract. For the first time in my life, money wasn't tight, and exhaustion didn't own me. I thought maybe this is the year I stop being invisible. That's when I found the place. A private mountain lodge wrapped in snow with tall windows, a stone fireplace, and a long wooden dining table that practically begged for a family Christmas dinner. It wasn't cheap, just over $9,000 for the week. But I didn't hesitate. I told myself this wasn't about approval. I told myself it was about togetherness. I booked it under my name, paid in full, sent the confirmation to my mother so she could share the excitement. Her reply came an hour later. "It looks beautiful. Lucas will love this. Not thank you. Not this means a lot. Just Lucas." I ignored the sting. In the following days, my brother started referring to it as our Christmas trip. My mother told relatives she had finally organized something special this year. I wasn't mentioned, not once. Still, I stayed quiet, because this was Christmas. And Christmas, I believed, forgave small erasures. Then came dinner. It was mid-December, cold, dark early. I stopped by my mother's house to drop off gifts I'd already bought for the lodge: blankets, board games, specialty foods. They were sitting comfortably, wine poured, music playing. I hadn't even taken my coat off when my mother said, casually, almost kindly, "Elena, we've decided this Christmas will be simpler." I smiled. "That's fine." She avoided my eyes. Lucas leaned back and said, "Yeah, just immediate family this year. Less tension." The room felt suddenly smaller. "I am immediate family," I said softly. My mother sighed like I was a child who didn't understand adult logistics. "You know what we mean." That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not emotional, clear. They had already decided. And as I stood there, holding bags for a Christmas I was no longer invited to, I realized something chilling. They weren't worried about losing me. They were confident they still owned what I'd paid for. And they had no idea how wrong they were. But Christmas hadn't even arrived yet, and the real unwrapping was still to come. The strangest part wasn't being uninvited. It was how normal they acted afterward. No raised voices, no dramatic fallout, just an unspoken assumption that I would accept my place, quiet, useful, and invisible, like I always had. I placed the bags down slowly. "So," I said, keeping my voice even, "just to be clear, I'm not coming to Christmas." My mother nodded, relief flashing across her face as if a difficult task had just been completed. "Yes, we think it's best this year." Lucas didn't even look up from his phone. "You're good on your own, Elena. You always are." That sentence followed me all the way to my car. "You're good on your own, Not "we'll miss you," not "this is hard," just a justification wrapped in a compliment. I didn't cry that night. I didn't call a friend or pour a drink. I opened my laptop. The lodge confirmation sat neatly in my inbox, exactly where it had been for weeks. My name, my card, my money. The cancellation window is still open. I stared at the screen, not in anger, but curiosity. What would happen if I stopped holding everything together? The next morning my phone buzzed with messages, not from my mother, not from concern, from logistics. Lucas. Hey, can you resend the lodge details? Need to check arrival times. My mother, 10 minutes later. Also, did you upgrade the kitchen? I want to plan the Christmas menu. I read the messages twice. They had removed me from Christmas, but kept the Christmas I paid for. Something inside me shifted. Not snapped, not broke, realigned. I replied to neither. Instead, I logged into the booking portal and clicked Cancel Reservation. No penalties. Full refund. A calm confirmation message appeared. Your refund will be processed within 3 to 5 business days. That was it. No drama, no announcement. I made coffee and went to work. By noon, the storm arrived. First, confusion. Mother. Elena, the lodge isn't showing in my email anymore. Did you change something? Then irritation. Lucas. This isn't funny. Fix it. I told people about this trip. Then anger. My phone rang. I let it ring. Voicemails followed. Elena, this is irresponsible. You're embarrassing us. Call me back. Now. They never asked why. They never asked how I felt. They only asked for the thing they lost. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, carrying a pie and concern like props. She smiled tightly. Let's not make Christmas difficult. I met her eyes and asked calmly, Was I invited? She hesitated. Well, not exactly. And yet, I said softly, you expected the gift. Silence. Her face hardened, not with guilt, but calculation. Do you really want to be the reason Christmas is ruined? That's when I understood. To them, I wasn't family. I was in infrastructure. And infrastructure is only noticed when it stops working. But they weren't done pushing. And they had no idea how far they were willing to go. After my mother left that night, my apartment felt unusually quiet. Not lonely, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after you finally stop explaining yourself. I washed the mug she hadn't used, placed the untouched pie in the fridge, and sat on the couch without turning on the TV. My phone lay face down on the table, buzzing every few minutes like an irritated insect. I didn't pick it up, because for the first time in my life I wasn't reacting, I was observing. The next day the tone changed. Guilt had failed. Now came pressure. Aunt messages, cousins checking in, carefully phrased texts that all carried the same message wrapped in different words. Your mom is really upset. Lucas is under a lot of stress. Christmas is about forgiveness, Elena. No one said they were wrong. No one asked, what did they do to you? By the third day, my brother called. I answered, out of curiosity, not hope. Why are you doing this? He asked immediately. No greeting, no warmth. You've made things really awkward. I leaned back in my chair. I was uninvited. That doesn't mean you cancel everything, he snapped. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. For quietly withdrawing what I paid for after being told I wasn't welcome. I laughed softly, and that seemed to anger him more. You've always done this, he continued. You take things personally and then punish everyone. No, I replied evenly. I stopped rescuing. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. Look, just rebook it. Mom's embarrassed. I already told people it was happening. There it was. Now we want you there. Now we miss you. Just optics. I won't, I said. He hung up. 2 days later, my bank called. The woman on the line sounded professional but cautious. Ms. Ward, we flagged an attempted transaction on your account. My stomach tightened. What kind of transaction? A large holiday accommodation booking. The billing name didn't match your account. I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. Was the name Lucas Ward? I asked quietly. Yes, she confirmed. The room felt suddenly cold. My own brother had tried to rebook the lodge using my saved payment details. I thanked her, declined the transaction, and hung up. Then I sat there, stunned. They hadn't just assumed I'd fix things. They'd tried to take it. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken, but because something fundamental had finally fallen into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was entitlement, and entitlement doesn't stop on its own. The next morning I started documenting everything, screenshots, emails, call logs, social posts where Lucas still hinted about a mountain Christmas, messages where my mother framed herself as the victim. I wasn't planning revenge, I was protecting myself. And slowly, quietly, I stopped responding. No explanations, no defenses, just silence. It drove them crazy. And that's when I realized something powerful. They didn't know who I was without access to me. But silence only works until people try to rewrite the story. And that part was just beginning. Silence doesn't end conflict. It exposes it. Within days of me going quiet, the narrative shifted. Publicly. I first noticed it on social media. A carefully chosen photo of my mother holding a mug by the window, snow falling, soft lighting. The caption read, "Some holidays teach you who really cares about family." No names, no details, just enough to invite sympathy. The comments filled quickly. "You're so strong, Grace. Family can be so disappointing. Proud of how you're handling this." I stared at the screen, feeling something new. Not anger, but disbelief. They weren't just excluding me. They were replacing me. Soon relatives began reaching out, not to ask for my side, but to confirm what they'd been told. "So, you canceled Christmas? Your mom says you just didn't want to come. Is everything okay financially?" That last one stung more than the rest. They had painted me as unstable, selfish, possibly broke. I realized then that this wasn't about the lodge anymore. It was about control of the story. And stories, once released, grow teeth. Christmas lights appeared across the city as December marched on. Store windows glowed with warmth. Families planned. I worked late, not to avoid being alone, but because being suddenly alone, peaceful. Still, doubt crept in at night. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, wondering if it would be easier to just apologize, even though I'd done nothing wrong. That urge scared me more than their cruelty. So I did something different. I stopped shrinking. I told my manager yes to a project I'd normally decline. I booked a solo weekend retreat for Christmas week. I donated the gifts I'd bought for the lodge instead of returning them. Every small decision felt like reclaiming ground I'd never realized I'd surrendered. Then came the email. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't long. It was cold. "Elena," it began, "until you learn to respect this family and stop creating division, it's best you don't attend future gatherings." I read it twice, no signature needed. I knew exactly who wrote it and who approved it. For years I'd believed I was holding us together. But reading those words, I finally understood the truth. They didn't want unity. They wanted compliance, and for the first time, I didn't feel rejected. I felt released. That night, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled December. Inside were receipts, timestamps, screenshots, and the fraud alert from my bank. I wasn't angry enough to explode. I was calm enough to wait, because when people rewrite history, they always forget one thing. Evidence doesn't argue. It just waits. And while they celebrated Christmas without me, I was quietly preparing the truth. Christmas morning arrived quietly. No shouting, no chaos, no forced smiles. Just me. A slow sunrise and a cup of coffee I actually tasted. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to someone else's house. I wasn't checking messages to see if I'd disappointed anyone yet. I wasn't bracing myself for passive comments wrapped in tinsel. Still, my phone didn't stay silent. Lucas posted early, a blurry photo of snow, a fireplace that wasn't theirs, and the caption, "Not how we planned it, but family always finds a way." The comments were full of sympathy, so brave, so strong, so unfair what happened. I closed the app. They were still pretending. What they didn't know was that pretending takes energy, and I had stopped feeding it. That afternoon I went for a walk through the city. The streets were quieter than usual. Storefronts glowed softly. Somewhere a church bell rang. I realized something surprising. I wasn't sad. I was lighter, and that terrified me. Because if losing them didn't break me, what else had I been holding on to for no reason? 2 days later, my Aunt Marianne called. She had always been different, observant, careful with her words. "Elena," she said gently, "I don't think you've been told the whole story." She forwarded me an email chain. It was between my mother and several relatives. In it, my mother wrote, "Elena decided not to contribute this year and backed out at the last minute. Lucas and I tried to manage, but it was embarrassing." I stared at the words, "decided not to contribute," as if I hadn't paid in full, as if I hadn't been erased. Marianne added one line beneath the forwarded email. "I didn't believe this, but others might." That's when I knew. This wasn't going to stop. They weren't just excluding me anymore. They were erasing me. That night, I added the email to my folder, not to expose them yet, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. January came quickly. Work picked up. Life moved forward. And slowly the messages from my family stopped. No apologies, no explanations, just distance. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Because when people lose control, they don't always let go. Sometimes they wait, and they strike when there's an audience. And soon, they would give me the perfect stage without realizing it. January faded into February, and something unexpected happened. Life improved, not in a dramatic, movie-style way. No sudden miracles, no grand speeches, just a steady, calm forward motion that felt unfamiliar and addictive. Without my family's constant pull, my days felt longer. My decisions felt lighter. I stopped explaining myself to invisible judges in my head. I worked better, slept deeper, laughed more easily. It scared me how peaceful it felt. That peace forced a hard question to the surface. If I'm doing better without them, what exactly were they adding to my life? I didn't answer it right away. Instead, I built it quietly. I took on leadership at work, something I'd avoided because it required confidence I'd never been allowed to develop. I accepted a promotion I once would have declined to keep the balance. I redecorated my apartment, removed heavy furniture, opened the space, let light in. Every small change felt symbolic. I wasn't preparing for revenge. I was preparing for independence. And that's when the invitations started. Extended family birthdays, anniversaries, casual dinners, people who hadn't taken sides yet. At first, it felt awkward. I could sense curiosity behind polite smiles, questions hovering unspoken. I didn't defend myself. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply showed up, well, healthy, stable, calm, and slowly something shifted. People noticed. They noticed that I wasn't bitter, that I wasn't struggling, that I wasn't the unstable, dramatic version they'd been quietly fed. Truth has a strange way of leaking out when lies can't match reality. Then came the call that changed everything. Marianne again. "There's a big family event coming up," she said. "Your grandparents' anniversary. Everyone will be there." Everyone, including my mother, including Lucas. "And Elena," she added carefully. "They've been telling their version again." I smiled, slow and thoughtful. For the first time, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. After the call, I opened the folder on my laptop, the one I hadn't touched in weeks. Receipts, emails, screenshots, the fraud alert, social posts, timelines. I wasn't angry after reading them. I was focused, because now I saw the whole picture clearly. This wasn't about Christmas. It was about control, credit, and image, and I finally understood something powerful. I didn't need to chase justice. All I needed was the right moment. I closed the folder and shut my laptop. Outside, the city lights flickered one by one. The calm I felt wasn't hesitation. It was the pause before momentum, the interval before the truth stepped onto the stage. Because the next time we'd all be in the same room, silence would no longer protect them. The invitation arrived a week later. Cream-colored card, elegant font. My grandparents' 50th anniversary celebration, a milestone event, carefully planned, publicly attended, and most importantly, witnessed. I stood in my kitchen holding the card, already aware of what my family was thinking. They assumed I wouldn't come. They thought shame had done its job. That alone told me how little they understood who I had become. I RSVP'd, yes. The day of the event, I took my time getting ready, not to impress, but to ground myself. I chose a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. Calm confidence speaks louder than spectacle. When I walked into the banquet hall, conversation softened, heads turned, not in shock but surprise. I smiled. I greeted people. I hugged my grandparents. I didn't look like a woman who had ruined Christmas. I looked steady. I spotted my mother near the center table. Her smile tightened the second our eyes met. Lucas stood beside her, scanning the room like a guard protecting territory. They hadn't expected me. Dinner began smoothly. Toasts were given, laughter rose, plates clinked. Then, right on schedule, Lucas couldn't help himself. He leaned toward a cousin and said, just loud enough, "It's been a rough year. Some people really let us down." I turned slowly. "Is that so?" I asked calmly. The table went quiet. My mother reached for her glass. "Elena, let's not." "No," I said gently. "Let's." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. "I think it's only fair," I continued, "that if my name is going to be used, the full story is shared." Lucas scoffed. "You always do this, create scenes." I met his eyes. "I haven't said anything yet." Then I tapped the screen. Up came the lodge confirmation. My name, my payment, the date. Gasps followed. I scrolled once more. The cancellation receipt, then the bank alert. The room felt suddenly smaller. "I was uninvited," I said evenly. "I canceled what I paid for, and when that wasn't accepted, someone tried to book it using my information." My mother stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate." "No," Marianne said from across the table. "This is overdue." Murmurs spread, confusion, realization. Lucas tried to laugh it off, but the sound fell flat. I didn't stay long after that. I kissed my grandparents goodbye, wished them happiness, and walked out with my head high. Behind me, questions exploded, and for the first time, I wasn't the one answering them. But the fallout hadn't even begun, and the truth was about to cost them everything they valued most. I didn't hear the explosion. I felt it. The moment I stepped outside into the cold night air, my phone began to vibrate. Once, twice, then nonstop. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening inside that hall. When truth enters a room, it doesn't whisper. It rearranges loyalties. By the time I reached my car, the damage was done. The next morning confirmed it. Messages poured in, not from my mother or Lucas, but from people who had witnessed everything. I had no idea. "That explains so much. You didn't deserve that." One message stood out. A business associate of my mother's wrote, "If this is how they treat family, it raises concerns." That single line told me everything. Their power had never been love. It was an image, and the image, once cracked, doesn't heal cleanly. Lucas tried first. He called 3 times before leaving a voicemail, his tone sharper than worried. Cornered. "You didn't have to do that. You humiliated us." "Us, not me. No, I'm sorry." I deleted it. My mother followed later that evening. Her message was softer, calculated. "We need to talk. This didn't need to be public." I almost laughed. For years my silence had protected them. The moment I spoke, I was the problem. I didn't respond. Because something else was happening, something far more satisfying. People were connecting dots. The stories they'd heard before no longer aligned with what they'd seen. My calm, my evidence, their reactions. Lucas stopped posting. My mother's carefully curated messages vanished. The noise died down, not because things were fixed, but because they couldn't control the narrative anymore. And that's when the shift truly occurred. For the first time, I wasn't explaining. They were. That week my aunt invited me to dinner. No agenda, no interrogation, just warmth. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes families don't break. They reveal." That stayed with me. Because I wasn't celebrating their discomfort, I was honoring my clarity. Still, I knew one thing. They wouldn't accept this quietly. People who lose control don't apologize. They escalate. And sure enough, the final move was already forming. Because when the image collapses, desperation always follows. It happened a week later. No warnings, no build-up, just a knock at my door on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. Some part of you always recognizes the weight of unfinished control. When I opened the door, my mother stood there alone. No dramatic entrance, no tears, just a carefully composed face and a posture that suggested reason, not regret. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, eyes scanning my apartment, not with curiosity but assessment, the same way she used to look at rooms before guests arrived. "Elena," she began, "things have gotten complicated." I waited. She sighed. "People are talking. Your uncle canceled dinner. Lucas is being treated unfairly at work because of rumors." There it was. Consequences, presented as inconveniences. She leaned forward. You didn't need to share everything. Families handle things privately. I met her gaze. Families don't uninvite one member and expect the gift to stay. Her mouth tightened. This is bigger than that now, she said. We need to move forward. We. Always we, when they needed something. I want you to help fix this, she continued. A statement. Something that clears misunderstandings. You can say emotions were high, that you overreacted. I felt an unexpected calm. So you want me to lie, I said simply. She looked offended. I want you to protect the family. That was the moment. The final one. I stood up. The family you're protecting never protected me. Her eyes softened then. Not with love, but loss of leverage. You're making a mistake, she warned quietly. People forgive women who keep peace. They don't forgive those who expose them. I opened the door. She hesitated, then rose slowly. At the threshold, she turned back. You'll regret this. I smiled, not unkindly. No, I said. I already survived it. When the door closed, something inside me settled permanently. No more waiting, no more defending, no more hoping they'd change, because the last card had been played, and it hadn't worked, and now only one thing remains to be done. The year ended quietly. No grand apologies, no dramatic reunions, just space. And in that space, something unexpected grew. Peace. The following Christmas arrived almost unnoticed. Decorations appeared in stores. Music played softly in cafes. People rushed again. But this time, the season didn't feel heavy to me, because I wasn't carrying anyone else's expectations. On Christmas Eve, I stood by my window watching snow fall over the city. The same snow I once thought needed to frame a perfect family picture. I smiled at the irony. I had once believed belonging required sacrifice, that love meant endurance, that silence was strength. I was wrong. Strength was walking away without hate. Belonging was choosing myself without guilt. Love was learning that respect is not negotiable. That night my phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. Short, careful. Hope you're well. No apology, no accountability, just a door cracked open in case I was ready to crawl back. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I was done returning to places where I had to shrink to fit. Instead, I lit a candle, wrapped myself in a blanket, and wrote a letter, not to them, but to myself. I wrote about the woman who had paid quietly, loved deeply, and waited patiently for crumbs of acknowledgement. And then I wrote about the woman who stood up without shouting, walked away without destroying, and told the truth without cruelty. They were both me, but only one was staying. At midnight, I stepped outside. Snow brushed my coat. The city breathed slowly. Somewhere, laughter drifted from a nearby apartment, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel excluded. I felt free, because the truth is, some families don't break your heart once. They slowly convince you to break it yourself, until one day, you stop. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life, if you've been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who always gives and never receives, hear this clearly. You are not difficult, you are not selfish, you are not wrong for wanting respect. And choosing yourself does not make you cruel, it makes you whole. Sometimes the most powerful Christmas gift you can give yourself is permission to leave, to heal, and to begin again. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe and comment below, because your voice matters too. And remember, peace is not found where you are tolerated. It's found where you are honored.